From America, with war appearing only weeks away. Good evening. The 7-man crew of the space shuttle Columbia have all been killed after the shuttle broke up as it returned to Earth. The 5 men and 2 women on board were just 15 minutes away from their scheduled landing at Cape Canaveral, but something went disastrously wrong. At 2 p.m. UK time, the families of the crew awaited their return. Radio contact was lost. A giant sonic boom was heard on the ground and eyewitnesses saw scorching debris hurtling towards the Earth. Catherine Jones reports.
The space shuttle streaking across the sky, still 38 miles high, but just 15 minutes from bringing her 7 crew home. Suddenly, something goes catastrophically wrong. Where there should be one vapor trail, there are now many.
Columbia, Houston, comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF, comm check.
850 miles further east in Florida, Mission Control calls to Columbia.
Columbia, Houston, comm check.
There is no reply. And in southern Texas, a massive roar, minutes long, is heard overhead.
The entire house started to shake. So I walked outside and immediately saw this spiral, long spiral in the air, and it was headed in a southeast direction from where we're at. And the rumbling continued. It was very intense for approximately 2 minutes, and then just stopped. And about that point, the trail disappeared down towards the sunrise.
Across a vast area, 120 square miles of Texas and Louisiana, pieces of Columbia's fuselage lie scattered. NASA says no one on board could have possibly survived.
They dedicated their lives to pushing the scientific challenges for all of us here on Earth. And they dedicated themselves to that objective and did it with a happy heart, willingly, and with great enthusiasm. The loss of this valiant crew is something we will never be able to get over, and certainly the families of all of them, we have assured we will do everything we can possibly do to guarantee that they work their way through this horrific tragedy.
The mission left 16 days ago. For 4 of the 7 crew, it was their first ever journey into space. Rick Husband was in command of Columbia. The pilot was William McCool. Michael Anderson was in charge of the shuttle's payload. Kalpana Chalwa was one of the specialist engineers on board. So was Dr. David Brown. Laurel Clark ran many of the experiments, and Ilan Ramon was Israel's first ever astronaut. These are pictures of the crew in training for their mission. Having an Israeli on board in the current political climate had raised fears of a terrorist attack, but Ramon had hoped his trip would highlight the potential for progress for his people.
Crazy person you can meet on the road also. Somebody that drives crazy can kill you also. So I'm not worried about any crazy person. I mean, that's life, part of the life.
But today, as the authorities begin collecting the wreckage for examination, no one is talking of terrorism. The Columbia was too high and travelling too quickly to have been shot down or hit by a plane. Instead, attention is likely to focus first on damage Columbia suffered at launch 2 weeks ago. A piece of insulating foam fell off a fuel tank and was thought to have struck the shuttle's left wing. Engineers had concluded it posed no risk to the re-entry to Earth's atmosphere. But clearly, for America's space program to continue, NASA desperately needs to find out quickly why, for the second time, a space shuttle's 7 crew have lost their lives. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
President George W. Bush told the families of the 7 astronauts tonight that the entire American nation grieved for their loved ones, but he also vowed that the U.S. space program would go on.
The cause in which they died will continue. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on. In the skies today, we saw destruction and tragedy. Yet farther than we can see, there is comfort and hope. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, lift your eyes and look to the heavens.
America's first space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
April 1981, and the first shuttle is launched into space. It was to be the dawn of a new age of cheap, reusable craft that were more like space pickup trucks than the Apollo rockets, which had landed men on the moon a decade earlier.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Getting men to the moon in 1969 had been NASA's crowning glory, but the Apollo rockets had one big problem. They could make one flight only. The shuttle was supposed to make space cheap. Over the years, 4 shuttles were built, but the time needed to prepare the craft for launch meant that flights continued to cost more than NASA had hoped. Then, in 1986, disaster.
1 minute, 15 seconds.
Shuttle Challenger explodes just 72 seconds after liftoff as the world watches in almost stunned disbelief. All 7 astronauts on board are killed, including schoolteacher Sharon McAuliffe. But the shuttle was redesigned, and since then flights have become routine again. In recent months, the craft has been playing a key role in construction of the International Space Station.
The space station program could well suffer. It was due to be completed in 2006, and I think it's fairly obvious now that that will not be the case. Whether they will eventually continue to construct it and to completion remains to be seen.
So what could have caused this disaster? Re-entry is one of the most dangerous parts of spaceflight, as the spacecraft is subjected to colossal temperatures. Ceramic tiles are meant to protect it from the heat, but sometimes they get shaken off during the launch. Missing tiles around the engine pods can be clearly seen on this previous shuttle mission. The angle of re-entry is also critical.
If it's too steep or too shallow, it's a major disaster one way or another. So it has to be very critical. It may have gone wrong.
It will be hard for NASA to establish what did go wrong. The shuttle debris is scattered over a wide area, and throughout re-entry, contact with the crew is impossible on any flight. Columbia was the first shuttle to go into space 22 years ago, but unless NASA's experts can establish what caused this disaster and confirm that the other shuttles are still spaceworthy, then Columbia may yet be the last. Ben Ando, 5 News.
Well, relatives and friends of the shuttle crew stood helpless at Cape Canaveral as the tragedy unfolded. Joining us now live from Florida, US correspondent Grayson Cam, who was on the ground watching and waiting for Columbia to land. Grayson, you witnessed those last few moments. I know the families were there too, waiting to find out what was happening. Can you describe that 15 minutes for us?
It was one of the most bizarre feelings I've ever gone through. As part of the local news media here around Orlando, I've covered several of these landings. We basically head out to the shuttle landing facility, to the runway strip. We get set up, we do some live shots, and then we turn our attention to the south and we wait. And there's a very specific sequence of things that happens. I grew up around here, we're used to it. About 5 minutes before landing, there's a pair of sonic booms, a boom boom, that shakes everything around you as the shuttle slides back below the sound barrier into slower speeds. Then a few minutes later, we look to the south, we see the silhouette of the shuttle start to move in over the runway, and we watch it land very quietly, very calmly. We didn't hear it, and then we didn't see it. And everyone started looking around, and I looked over the countdown clock that counts down to landing time, and it started counting back up. And none of us knew what to do, and then we heard someone at Mission Control use the word contingency, which is generally used to express a catastrophic failure, a loss of a spacecraft. Shortly after that, within 7 minutes after that, all of the guests, all of the family members who were standing on the other side of the press building were all corralled into NASA vehicles and taken away, taken back to a secure place where they could be debriefed. We know family members of the astronauts got a call shortly afterward from the President of the United States consoling them, but really there's very little to console the astronauts who went through this, and also the people who work here. Our entire community is based around the Kennedy Space Center. You can really imagine if you, for instance, live near an Air Force base, you know, everyone you know knows someone who works there. Oh yeah, my Uncle Mike, he works, he sweeps the floors out at the Air Force base. That's what it's like here, from the commanders and the people in charge all the way down to the janitors. Everyone here knows somebody who's involved in the space program, so the whole community is just reeling from this.
Okay, Grayson.
And it's really, we've dealt with it before, but we don't know how to handle it now.
Grayson, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us live from Florida. Now, the shuttle has been described as a flying brick. Now, this you can see here is a detailed scale model. It's basically a glider, but can only be flown by the most skilled pilots. Dr. Chris Welsh is a lecturer of astronautics at Kingston University. He's come in to help us understand what may have gone wrong. Chris, if I give you the model, and you can perhaps try to explain, at the moment, what are the most likely reasons for what's happened?
I think attention's already being focused on the most likely reason as being a failure in the thermal protection system. You can see the underside of the shuttle here is covered in these black carbon tiles. These are to protect the underside of the space shuttle from the intense heat of re-entry. The space shuttle comes in belly first. If any of these tiles were to fail for any reason, and we saw some shots earlier of one or two become detached before, especially around this area, the intense heat would immediately start eating into the structure of the space shuttle.
Now, information is coming in all the time. Yeah. I understand that NASA have just said that there's evidence of extreme structural heating. Does that make sense?
That would make absolute sense. Once the thermal protection system failed, the whole structure would heat up, it would start to melt, it would start to burn, it would lose all its strength, and the forces acting on it, the aerodynamic forces as it falls through the atmosphere, would lead to the breakup of the vehicle.
Now, there are certain things that are almost too awful to talk about, but a lot of people will be wondering, how much would the astronauts have known about what was going on?
I suspect very little. You can't be completely sure, but this sort of failure, once it starts to happen, happens so fast that I believe they'd have only had maybe a few seconds' notice.
Now, where does this leave NASA? I mean, I know that there are other space missions in space at the moment. What's going to happen?
Well, certainly I expect the remaining space shuttle fleet will be grounded for a year, 2 years. Depends how long they take to determine what they believe will be the cause of the problem. But there's the problem, the International Space Station is in orbit with astronauts on board at the moment. Now, I should emphasize they're not in any danger. They can get back if they need to. They have a Soyuz capsule there. But for the point of view of actually continuing the space station program and building the space station up, it's really pretty reliant on the shuttle to deliver both the larger components and a large amount of supplies as well.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll move on to other news now. Tony